Hello and welcome. You're tuned in to another edition of the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Later on in the show, we've got a treat for you. A contributor to our show, Katie Hart, has submitted her Theater of the Mind, a real-life encounter with the supernatural from our own Katie Hart. We'll hear that a little later on in today's episode. Today, we're going to focus on something I find fascinating. I love the topic of ancient aliens, the idea of it. And then when you can tie it to the Bible, are there actual references throughout the Bible that give us a clue to our alien origins or alien intervention that's taken place on this planet? Well, our guest believes so. His book is called Ancient Aliens in the Bible, Evidence of UFOs, Nephilim, and the True Face of Angels in Ancient Scriptures. Xavier Hayes is our guest this evening. He's a researcher, teacher, and archivist of ancient manuscripts with a keen interest in lost civilizations, ancient aliens, and the myths of the, how do I say this, Xavier? Preduvian world?
Pre-Diluvian world.
Yeah, that's exactly what I meant to say. Pre-Diluvian world. He's also the author of 10 books. What a show-off, including Ancient Giants of the Americas. All right, it's great to have you back with us. I know it's been a while since you visited with our show, and I'm glad to have you back on, especially about this topic. And I've got to ask you, somebody who's a researcher and has a chance to look at these ancient manuscripts and kind of pore over them, go through, what's it like when you start to uncover some of these secrets? How do the other people that you work around and, you know, fellow researchers and investigators handle the information that you've been uncovering?
Well, I would have to say that they've handled it well, because I'm literally exposing and getting to the meat of the matter when we talk about these sort of things. For instance, you know, this book, you know, it's Bible related, right? Mm-hmm. And I was able to get the foremost Vatican scholar, Mauro Biglino, co-signing, because he wrote the foreword to the book. He gave me all his blessings, and here's a man that translated over 20 works for the Vatican. He was one of their top scholars, and after a while, he was kind of just, you know, kind of sick of promoting the lie, you know, basically because the church, you know, his translations had to make it to look like visions and like ethereal counters, right? Mm-hmm. And instead of what the Hebrew and the, you know, the ancient texts he's going off of are saying, that they were physical encounters, you know, real people, concrete encounters, right? So after, you know, doing 20 books and 10 or 15 years of coming across this, where you had to keep changing the meanings to fit the narrative, he finally cracked and was like, you know, I'm gonna write it as it says. And when he did that, you know, saying how these encounters, like, for instance, Moses encountered, how they were, you know, saying physical things like a spaceship or something that was concrete, like he was led by something, right? These things had a physical concreteness to it, and he translated that to make sure people kind of would understand that what these things we're talking about were fantasy. These are real encounters that happened to people a long time ago. And of course, he got fired and made everyone mad at the church and the
Right.
Vatican. So he got fired, and they tried to cover it up, and then they quickly countered with, well, you know, if we did find aliens, that's just God's, you know, star being. He loves them too, you know. And the Vatican, they have the top satellites and telescopes, you know, all searching for this for these extraterrestrials, for this question, which, what do they really know, right?
Right.
So he was fired. Basically, one of his books was translated into English. I think it was Everything You Know About the Bible Was Wrong, and kind of made its way to the internet forums, as a PDF. And this is where I picked it up, and reading it, I was blown away, because, you have the ancient alien question, and it's become super popular. I mean, think at what the series has gone on for 10 seasons, I guess now, so there's been a lot of this sort of topic hitting the mainstream, hitting the public mind. And, you have von Daniken's works and the works of Sitchin, which trailblazed this whole idea. But no one's kind of really... When you
started this, though, did you go into it with the concept that you were going to prove that the Bible really does have kind of encounters or mentions encounters of aliens, or were you going into it to kind of debunk the whole scenario?
Oh, no, because I had already written about aliens in Egypt and, cargo cults, and very interested in this for a long time. So after I read Big Lino's work, I kind of took it upon myself to go into to basically back up and verify what he's talking about. There's no way you can debunk this, especially using his works. I mean, if all of what we know of the Bible comes from the Hebrew, right? Like there's literally one of the ancient Greek Hebrew texts, which is the oldest form. Everything comes off of that, right? So if you just kind of go to the source and go off his works, he's able to translate some of these words and these meanings, and you look at it, it makes perfect sense. Then when you start reading it and the way that he wants, the way it's supposed to be read, it's concrete. I mean, it's literally telling you what was going on back in the day were physical encounters. There were ancient aliens. And it verifies all the ancient Sumerian, all of the ancient Egyptian, right? So it all kind of it validates all of that. And then you have the Indian stuff, with the Vimanas, and the whole Indian history is full of this stuff as well. And most Westerners aren't even aware of that.
No, I guess I'm not. Can you give us a little bit of background on that? I mean, that's a fascinating aspect of the whole story.
Oh yeah, see, we're in the Western mind. And basically the Abrahamic religions, right? Islam, Christianity, Judaism, they all have the going off the God made sure this book is God's word, all right? So this is God's word, you can only read this one, whatever. But the Indians have a collective history. So there's no, you're not going to get your head chopped off because you don't read the Ramayana or whatever, right? It's a collective history that's been passed down and collected for thousands, even tens of thousands of years. So if you go into the Bhagavad Gita and some of these other ancient Hindu histories, they're literally full of fantastic weapons that could be described as nuclear weapons, right? I think Mohenjo-daro is one of the areas over there, I guess on the Pakistani border, where they found vitrified, it looked like a nuclear bomb had went off, right, in ancient history. And then you read the story about what happened, and it's describing I think it was Vishnu, who had a fantastic weapon that literally, make the nails fall off and turn people to dust. Crazy, what sounds like advanced technologies. And then they have descriptions of the Vimana. The Vimana was like a space vehicle. Mm-hmm. And this was common to them as common knowledge. Most Indians who have a little bit of understanding of this, the ancient alien question is not even a big deal. They're like, oh yes, our ancient history is full of it. And then you see massive megalithic structures and incredible stoneworks that are attributed to these gods and these deities. Mm-hmm. And these massive stoneworks, you can kind of see all throughout history and all throughout the world, having the same sort of kind of technique and same sort of look, right? And it's just, it boggles the mind. There has to be some sort of connection to that pre-flood era, or even if it was a little bit after the flood, why there's so much similarities between these ancient cultures and some of their stoneworks. It's amazing. And India has incredible. I mean, they actually have charts and blueprints of these flying machines, and they've been recreated in laboratories. So we know there's some sort of correct history with the Indian aspect of the ancient alien question. It's very fascinating.
I love the aspect that there are all of these different cultures that share similarities, cultures that had no way to communicate back and forth with one another around the world, but their beliefs, their depictions, even their buildings are very similar. I mean, it does make you feel like there was something going on that was being aided along the way. That's always been a huge fascination aspect for me. Unless you believe in, like I've mentioned, the 100 monkey theory, where if as soon as that 100 monkey knows to do something, it seems to spread around the world to other monkeys. Could it just be that when you've got enough people focused on creating a structure, does that kind of translate into the Akashic records and other people download it, other cultures, and start to replicate these designs? Or is it really alien interference, alien aid, I guess, throughout this? You have no doubt in your mind, though, that we have had alien interactions throughout time and history.
Of course, and even the Akashic record is pretty amazing in its alien kind of thesis, right? Because that would go into the interdimensional thing, and who's given the knowledge, and why, how does that exist across cultures and across time? That's a very interesting thing, especially if we live in a holographic matrix-like universe. But to look at the idea that this could have just existed here, and then they, in the middle of nowhere, thousands of miles away, and maybe even different time periods, they came up with the same thing is kind of absurd. Knowing what we know about how impossible it is to create these megalithic structures and to move them. And then you have the whole idea of the T-clamps, right? These sort of impressionist clamped sort of things where, there's no metal clamps anymore, but you can see the impression of them. Like clearly there was some sort of pouring structure that held these stones together, and you could see evidence of this T-clamp imprint. I mean, in every ancient culture. I mean, you find them in Peru, you find them in ancient Egypt. I have the books of Chapez, who was like a French explorer and artist who literally documented all this. So I have the sketchings that he did in the 1800s when he was in Iran, at Persepolis, when he was in Crete, and you could see him, documenting these T-clamp things. I have the sketches. I'm not sure if they're still available to see if you actually visit some of these areas. I mean, for instance, we can't really go to Persepolis. That's going to be a hard one to visit. But we know in Crete there's some. I mean, all the way in Ethiopia. Look at Ethiopia, which no one's really aware of. They have these T-clamp things. They have these massive megalithic structures. You have these churches that were just carved at a rock in the side of the mountain, just beautiful, that look exactly like what you see in India. And the Indian texts talk about the technology that was used for these. And then you have all the vibrational aspects and weird things, like just so much mystery and conundrum involved in this that it kind of makes sense that the mainstream would relegate it to fringe science and call you crazy if you dare even try to look at it, much less, you want to talk about aliens in the Bible? You must be nuts,
Why do you think they're so hard pressed to admit it? I mean, if God is this great all-powerful being, it would be silly to think that this artist only created one piece of work. You would think that if God exists in the way that religion wants us to believe, that we're not the only species. We can't be the only planet that out of this vast universe that he would have put life on. Yeah, and
they have a lot of problems with this, because then why are we special, right? It gets into theology. And the real issue is misinterpretation of God. The true God is metaphysical. It can't build stuff. It's not a person, right? It didn't build Mecca or none of this. It can't. It's a metaphysical thing, and it's bound by the rules of karma and the laws of the universe, right? So this is what Bigolino talks about, is we have, the misinterpreted God, right? Which is be like us, when it says, when God made man in his own image, so obviously he kind of looked like us. Maybe he was a humanoid from Mars. So then it goes into the God-like aspect. So these aren't really gods per se, but if you have the ability to genetically splice primitive beings and create humanoids and create new sort of species, that's sort of godlike, right? That, the ego might confuse itself for being a god, and I'm sure they were to them and to others. But that doesn't necessarily make you God. But if you're reading concrete texts and what they're actually saying, this is what they're describing. So these gods and the God, weren't necessarily the metaphysical God that, is the true God. These are basically scientists, explorers, and, aliens who probably were humanoid, who had the ability to genetically manipulate and to create species, and maybe they were mining for gold, as Sitchin claims. Also, you have the whole aspect of the Adam and Eve's, like, for instance, because most people, they don't have the knowledge or the mind. The mind's not open enough to interpret or to even think that the Adam and Eve were a race. They were like the Adam, right? Because it clearly says this, the Adam, the Adama, which is Earth, meaning the species on Earth, right? So the Adams were a specific species. And same with the Eves. So it wasn't just one person and one lady, one guy and a girl who were, in the Garden of Eden or whatever. And, that's kind of how it's been. That's an easy way to sort of portray it and get it across to the ages, right? And this is kind of what the image we're left with, Adam and Eve and all this stuff. Instead of knowing or learning or realizing these were races, and these were experimental races, and they weren't the first. I'm sure they made many mistakes, and even says this in scriptures. So you create this race, and then what happens is maybe the Eves were beautiful, and if you're a space platoon and you got like, say, the angels, which we think of angels as ethereal sort of angelic things that kind of come and disappear. Instead of seeing them they're described as physical beings, basically troops. In the book Enoch they list every angel, and then every angel has a specific duty. One was a botanist, one was a metallurgy, one did this, one did that. So, why would an angel have specific duties, right? So let's just say you're a space platoon, and you're kind of stuck in this planet, and you see that they had created these beautiful women, and maybe it was compatible. Now you're horny. Now you want to, hey, we want to get it going, which they were forbidden to do, and it clearly states this. And they were like, oh, whatever, And then they did their thing, and then what happened? Then you have the birth of the giants, the Nephilim. This is one of the consequences of the angels having sex with the Eves. And this is all in the book of Genesis. So what happened is, now you got giants running around. These giants were cannibalistic. They were bad. They weren't,
Well, a lot of these things are misinterpretations. Do you believe the term angel is misinterpreted? The term giants is misinterpreted? What was giant to them at the time? Was it, they were the average of 5 foot tall, and the giants were 6'3"? What was a giant to them?
Well, the angel comes from the Greek agalos. Like, literally, there's only one word in the history that kind of interprets angel. Which can be, and I believe in angels in a metaphysical sense. Like, I've personally had a few encounters, right? Even though it's a metaphysical thing, but what they're talking about is, actual specific duties, and specific people that had a specific job. Now, the giants, same thing. Raphaim is the Hebrew word for giant. And this would be, and they give listings of certain heights, right? So we know, like, for instance, based on the biblical story of David and Goliath, that David, according to the cubits that Goliath was about 9 to 10 feet tall. Same with Og. Og was one of the last kings of the giants, right, in Bashan. And he was about 13 feet tall, according to what we have in the records. And the funny thing is, like, when Og died, he had a huge, like, iron bed, like 13 feet long iron bed that remained a tourist attraction for many years afterwards. And this is, I think, it's in Deuteronomy. You could read this. And this was in the lands of Syria. So, we know there are the descriptions that exist that there were giants. And again, the giants is a prevalent theme in all of history and all of cultures in the world. Native Americans talk about the same kind of giants, cannibalistic red-headed giants that they had to fight off, and that they were evil, and the Great Spirit destroyed them in a flood because they were wicked. And this is the same kind of story that we hear in the Bible.
But now this is if we're taking the Bible. See, I've heard Bible scholars refer to the Bible in two different ways. One, that it's a book of parables and lessons to be learned. The other, that it is the Word of God and that everything in it is exactly true. Could some of these things be nothing more than the fable, not necessarily meaning he was a giant of 13 feet tall, but that in the, that in the annals of history, he was considered a giant? Could it be that it's just been misinterpreted throughout the years, the way these explanations go through?
Not really, because these are, if you look at Bible as history, which you're supposed to, and you also have the parables. Like, the thing about these ancient texts is they're historical, but you also have the parables, and you also have the stories, right? And these are, like, the story of Jesus is incredible and timeless. It's a great story. That's why it's still relevant. And the teachings of Jesus benefit everyone. And if you could be Christ-like, right, that's what it means to be Christian. And if you could, if you do good, and if you basically make the right choice and just be nice and don't be greedy, you're going to have a major impact on your life and other people's lives. And I think these are good things. But you have the history that's kind of embedded with it also. Like, if you look at the Quran, half of that is just basically stuff from the Bible. And pretty much we know what from the Bible you can find in ancient Sumerian texts and ancient Egyptian stuff. So they're kind of piecing together and putting it out. But then you have also the Proverbs and sort of this, be afraid, right? Because they want you to be afraid. Because basically religion is, it's necessary to control people. And that's the issue. Like, religions were created to control you, and they control you with fear. That's why I say, it's the Word of God, and don't read anything else. Because if you start reading other stuff, you're gonna be like, wait a minute, I don't know. But there's many good things about the Bible and in a lot of these ancient texts. But you have to be able to separate the history and what they're trying to tell you. It has real encounters and real life historical things. Even though they'd be like, where's the proof and this and that? This is so long ago. Of course it's going to be hard. And even if Jesus never existed and he was created by the Roman Church, it still has power because the story is good. Because the story, to make you a better person and to give you these parables it makes it still real. Whether or not he was created by the Roman Church or not. So there are those issues. But if the point of history is to learn, right, and to be able to not make the mistakes and try to like learn from the history, so that way everyone improves everyone, then you have to really, kind of look at the ancient texts in a different way.
Boy, we're kind of failing that miserably then, aren't we? As more and more people are pulling away from the church, it seems that religion has taken over spirituality and has turned people off to that.
That's the problem, because
Right.
because the religion doesn't look at it, the spiritual aspect of it. They look at it as a money making tool and a tool to control you. And now we have technology. Like, back in the day, everyone went to church and it was a big deal. And, there wasn't too many other things going on in your life that could, bring you away from the church, right? Now we got technology, we got smartphones, we got Stranger Things to binge watch, we got all kinds of crazy stuff. Why am I going to waste my time with this church nonsense, right? Especially if it's not done in a way where I'm getting the real story. So that's on them, When you got these mega churches and hundreds of millions of dollars and pastors making tons of money, and they're not even aware or even telling their flock about, this ancient book might be talking about ancient aliens. We should check this out. I've never in my life, and I've been to, I love spiritual issues, and I love going to churches, different churches, and all kinds of different faiths and stuff. I think it's really important. And no one's ever said once, that there were some ancient aliens leading Moses to the promised land, But when he got there were some giants, so you're like, what are we going to do,
We've got so much to look at when you look at the book of the Bible and all of these different stories and different and again, I don't mean to keep going to interpretations, but as you said, even your scholar that worked for the Vatican, he got frustrated because he was forced to depict what was being said in the way that slanted it towards what the church's version of the story needed to be. How do we know that through the time and through all time that all of these different manipulations of the Bible, that we're truly getting especially with a guy like this, that we're getting a true definition of what these moments and these points in history actually meant?
Well, yeah, if this guy figured it out now, who's to say that it hasn't been figured out many times before throughout history? And we know for a fact that at least in the 1300s, I think it was, or maybe the 1600s, the Council of Nicaea, they were responsible for editing the Bible and kind of giving us what we know as the Bible today. So they took out, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jasher, all these, any works that were kind of ancient alien themed or they couldn't explain as just some vision, they removed those completely. And they hoped they would never see the light of day. Much like Akhenaten, the Pharaoh Akhenaten, how they tried to erase him from history. And then when he resurfaced, and he has elongated skulls and crazy history with that. It's just, well, what are they going to say? So we know that they have significantly edited the Bible and took out anything that wasn't easily explainable as a vision or some sort of fantasy or dream, right? And we know this. So what we're left is what was in the Bible that we can still kind of pick apart. For example, one of the most famous ones would be the book of Ezekiel, and how Ezekiel has an incredible description of like helicopters and wheels within wheels and fantastic machines flying around, and without understanding technology, this is the problem. If you don't understand how to describe a technological event because your vocabulary doesn't have the capability to do so, you're going to relate it to things you're familiar with, birds, a flying horse, right? Things like Muhammad. Muhammad flew to Temple Mount on the Bucca, which was like a white horse. Of course, they're not going to be like an amazing Orville spaceship or something. They wouldn't know. It's a white horse. It took Muhammad over from Mecca to Jerusalem, right? So the technological means to describe didn't exist, and it really hasn't existed up until now. So you have to kind of look at it as, well, it just doesn't make any sense that Muhammad would be flying on a white horse, right? Or the thunder, even in the history of the Chinese, like the thunder dragon, and the dragon coming down to bring civilization through with an egg or whatever. It's just, and we know this is something very, very unique because we have the cargo cult theory, and the cargo cult theory basically proves all of this. Because
well, explain to me what the cargo cult theory is. All right, Xavier Hayes, he's written the book Ancient Aliens in the Bible, Evidence of UFOs, Nephilim, and the True Face of Angels in Ancient Scriptures. Let me start to see some of your what you believe are some of the most explosive bits throughout the Bible that prove to you beyond a shadow of a doubt that we are talking about alien craft, alien ships, and alien life. What are some of your favorites and the ones you think are the most powerful?
There's some that I want to get into, but I think we're talking about John Frum and the cargo cult. And I think if I could kind of explain that real quick.
Yes, please. Yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead with the cargo cult. Yes. That's
going to tie everything together. Okay, now, during World War II in the South Pacific Islands, you have, like Papua New Guinea, and you have these the Aborigines, right, who basically in the middle of nowhere haven't seen anything. And what happened was John Frum, he crashed his jet, crash landed, and when he got out, he encountered one of these tribes on these islands. And because John Frum was an African American fighter pilot, he looked like them, right? So to them, he was like some sort of god who crashed in this amazing, incredible jet machine. And then he left because he was rescued, right? And he probably promised to return, and he gave him food and gifts and stuff like that while he was there and in aid. But when he left, the curious thing happened. The natives of this island basically made him a god, and they recreated the airplane with their little bamboo things, and they mimicked him with the radio and stuff, and he became this sort of godlike figure to them. So a whole cult was created basically off this one encounter. Now, if this happened in the 40s, I mean, why wouldn't it be the same sort of effect thousands of years ago? It literally would, and this is kind of why we know this is possible, because of John Frum. Now we have, in the Bible, there's a few things, few stories that are basically really incredible and really talk about the angels and ancient aliens. I mean, even Moses, there's a particular encounter that was left out, that they took out, and about Lamech. Now Lamech was, I think, the grandson of Noah, I believe. Or I have to look into it more. I can't remember off the top of my head. But basically what happened was Lamech had a child that wasn't human and had glowing eyes and was sort of like an alien sort of creature hybrid or something. Because he asked his wife, he was like, "Hey, did you? This looks like one of the angels. What's going on here, right?" So he had to go seek out his grandfather, who was Enoch, who lived, with the Watchers, right? And Enoch was famous for actually walking with the gods and being taken up into the space and into the heavenly chariot and getting the tour of space. So we have this encounter.
Now, where are you seeing these stories? Is that strictly in the Book of Enoch?
The Book of Enoch. Well, the Book of Enoch has the Enoch tale, but I have the book here. I'm trying to look for to see. I think the Book of Jasher.
Now, let me ask you, with the Book of Enoch, that is something that people reference often when they're talking about the alien connection. But for people that are not very religious based, the Book of Enoch is not included in the canon of the Bible. But does the church accept it as an original book, but just not one that they wanted to include in the Bible? Do you know where I'm going with that?
Yeah, they won't accept it because it's considered part of the Apocrypha literature, which they removed. So they're not going to want to teach you about it. The Book of Enoch was removed from the Bible and banned by the church. But we know about it because its copies survived in Ethiopia. Also, they have Greek and Italian translations as well. And details of Enoch recount his strange trip to heaven and his subsequent learning of the secrets and mysteries of the gods. So, the first book of Enoch is regarded as canonical by the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, right? And, the Ethiopian and the Eritrean church are like the oldest, basically. Some of the oldest Bibles we have come from them. So they really can't, dispute it, even though Christian or Jewish groups reject them. But at the same time he's also referred into in the Bible. Like there are, a few instances in the Bible that mention Enoch. And also we have the Book of the Watchers, which is part of the Dead Sea Scrolls. Because we don't know what the original Enochian tales were written in. The only language in which we have now would be in the ancient Ethiopian Ge'ez language, right? So they kind of don't want you to know about it, and they don't want you to even think about Enoch, even though in the Bible there are a few mentions of his name. So he's still there. But, in the book of Enoch describes about the fall of the Watchers, who were the rogue angels who fathered the Nephilim. The Nephilim would be the giants. So we have these reports, and it's just too incredible. There's a reason why they don't want you reading the book of Enoch. I mean, it describes the 200 angels who basically couldn't help having sex with the Eves. That resulted in creating the race of giants. And the angels leaked the secrets of the gods to the Eves. And then you have the Book of the Giants, which was part of the Dead Sea Scrolls, that goes back to 200 BC. That actually backs up the first book of Enoch, with tales about the time before the floods, when giants and dragons, dinosaurs, who knows? Why are all these incredible things in there? And that's a whole other thing, like dinosaurs. Like, what are those? So there's a bunch of things in the book of Enoch that they would rather have you not know.
All right, we need to take a quick break. We're going to open up the annals of our Darkness Radio history by visiting with one of our past contributors. In her true life encounter tonight, she's sharing it for the first time with us. It's time now for Theater of the Mind with Katie Hart and her real life account of Whispers in the Dark.
Remember, if you will, the early 90s. Informer by Canadian rap artist Snow was on the charts. Wearing overalls a la crisscross was cool, and Katie was a young little sprite visiting her grandma up in Hibbing, Minnesota. First of all, you should know that I was pretty young, 9 or 10. I had no previous interests or experiences in the paranormal. Sure, I liked Scooby-Doo, but who didn't? I liked it for the dog, really, and their crazy adventures, but not necessarily for the ghosts. Anywho, little background on Hibbing, Minnesota. If you've never been up there, it's a small town with some notable places to visit and some interesting history. Bob Dylan was born and raised there. There's a giant iron ore pit that you can go visit. In fact, there's a little museum you can go see about iron ore. It's super exciting. Greyhound buses started up there as well. If you stop into the museum, yes, there's a Greyhound bus museum, you may experience a kindly haunting. And I mean, like super nice ghosts. Ghosts that stack up pamphlets nicely, doors and windows closed when tourists open them. It's just really nice. Just Minnesota nice ghosts. Anyway, there's also this place called Old Hibbing. Want to feel like you're living in the apocalypse? Like you're literally chasing down zombies in a nightmarish hellscape? Well, this is it. Decaying roads, street signs, forgotten foundations lay untouched in Old Hibbing. Why? Because of the iron ore pit. They wanted to expand it. But the town was in the way. So what the hell, let's just move the damn thing down the road to a little town called Alice, which is now Hibbing. Either way, with the aid of horses, logs, and a whole lot of 19-diggity willpower, they moved the houses, businesses, and people away so they could continue to dig for iron ore for the war. The family folklore is that my house my grandma lived in was one of those houses. Rolled down the road in 19-diggity whatever, and placed in New Hibbing. The house itself was everything that you would think of in an old creepy house, but still equipped with all the modern amenities of the early 90s. Like one of those TVs that looked like a piece of furniture with the knob still on it. The house was last updated in the 70s, so it had a whole lot of 70s love going on. A lot of burnt orange colors, macrame, and wall-to-wall linoleum. The one thing they never cared to update, though, was the basement. The basement was literally a hole. Like a real cellar. Just a staircase leading into a relatively large hole in the ground that was outlined in cinder blocks. But the floor? Just dirt. And I remember even one of the walls being dirt too. Or maybe that was just my imagination. My grandma kept preserves and canned goods down there, and my favorite, Campbell's chicken soup, also Cheez-Its, which were a favorite among me and my cousins. But man, let me tell you, I did not want to be down there. Maybe it was the creepy, crawling, skittering things. The slimy, sticky, slippery things that I knew made their homes down there. In the dirt. Just beneath my bare feet. Or maybe it was the feeling of knowing that I was in a dirt hole underneath the house, surrounded on all sides like a tomb. Like the act of just being down there was like being buried alive. Or maybe it was just a feeling. That feeling of dread. The unspeakable, undescribable feeling that something was just wrong. But you didn't know how or why. It was Christmas time, and my grandma had the whole place decked out in circa 1950s Christmas decor. Hooray! The kind of stuff that you would literally burn your hands off if you touched it. Like those little candles placed in the windows. It's like a freaking death trap. But I love how they look at night. It's so peaceful and pretty. It made the whole house feel like a fairy tale. We had done our annual tackle my dad to get to the presents tradition, and we went to bed. My dad and my brother were in one room. My mother and me were in another. We shared the same bed, me and my mom. And I was asleep, with sugar plums and Scooby-Doos dancing in my head. Wham! Somebody had hit me in the head with a pillow, or something like that. I woke up out of a dead sleep, and it was silent. Nothing. My mom slept like a rock, and I just stared into darkness. Something had seriously walloped my face pretty good, enough to wake me out of a dead sleep and want to punch my brother in the jaw. Or, whoever did that. Suspecting it was my little brother, getting me back for the torture that myself and my cousins put him through, I snuck into my dad's room thinking that he'd be hiding to scare me. Nope. Out like a light. Him and my dad, totally asleep. And complete and total silence. Then, Katie. Who was calling my name? At the time, no one called me Katie except for my immediate family. They called me by my full name or my nickname, Kate. It had to be my grandma, whose room was on the ground floor. So I crept really, really slowly back into the hall. I stood at the top of the stairs listening at my name being slowly beckoned by my grandma. I think. Katie. Then I took one stair at a time. Slow, creaking steps. Once I reached about the third step from the top, I could see the living room emerge, lit by 1950s electric candle and bubble lights on the trees. And I heard my name again. Katie. I quickly stuck my head down so I could see the living room, but no one was there, just the tree and the knobby TV and the soft call of my name. Katie. So I followed my name through the living room and into the kitchen. The kitchen was dark, but I could see that the TV was on in my grandma's room. She must have been awake. And I took a massive sigh of relief. Now my courage was back, so I turned confidently to go down the hallway. Katie. But it wasn't coming from my grandma's room. The hallway was in front of me. To my left, the bathroom and a guest room. And at the end of the hall was my grandma's room with the dull roar of the television. And to my right, the cellar. The dirt hole that quietly called my name. I turned to face the stairs that led into nothing but darkness. Next to the Campbell's soup and the Cheez-Its was something calling my name. Not just my name, but the name only my family called me. down in the dirt with the spiders and slugs, something was beckoning me to come meet it, to come to its lair. I'm curious, but I'm not dumb. I slowly backed up, and I ran upstairs into bed with my mom and threw the covers over my head. My mom was still fast asleep. My brother and my dad hadn't even moved. And I felt alone. Except for the faint voice I could hear in the cellar. Years later, I finally told my family what happened. I thought my cousins would make fun of me and my brother would finally get the upper hand. Like hell that would happen. My mom wasn't surprised. She told me several stories about red eyes appearing in the hallways and closets, about door slammings, all the typical paranormal fare. Whether this was true or just a fun little story to tell the cousins and me, I really don't know. I lost in touch with that side of the family after my grandma passed away shortly after the event took place. But if I ever heard that voice from the hole, that voice from the dark void that was that cellar, I'd know that voice right away. And I'd run.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from
beyond the darkness.
We're back. This is the best in paranormal talk radio. This is Beyond the Darkness. I'm your host, Dave Schrader. Ancient aliens in the Bible, that's our topic tonight. Evidence of UFOs, Nephilim, and the true face of angels in ancient scriptures. Xavier Hayes joining us. I do want to mention, though, folks, we are up against the wire. We have 1 day left for our Halloween for Hunger campaign. We need your help desperately to hit that goal. So please, if you've got it in your heart, help us out whatever way you possibly can. Our goal was $15,000. We're barely over $9,586. We need your help to hit that goal. We did it last year with a huge push at the last minute. I know you guys can help us get there. Just go to darknessradio.com, click on the Halloween for Hunger banner, and make your donation right now. It's very simple. Every dollar we raise helps supply 3 meals for a family in need, a person in need. And we need your help now more than ever to hit that goal. So please join us in this as we're helping Second Harvest Heartland help feed our friends, neighbors, loved ones, coworkers right here in the United States. Their buying power is so powerful that they are able to help so many people with very few dollars. So as much as you can afford would be great, but $1, $5, $100, whatever you've got, please help us out so we can hit our goal of $15,000 this year. We know with your help we can achieve this and shatter that goal by tomorrow. All right, let's get back into it. And I will mention, if you can't find the link for any reason on my website, email me, dave@darknessradio.com. That's dave@darknessradio.com, and I will get the link emailed over to you so you can make that donation. Let's get back into this. You've got a lot of stories to share, Xavier. I know there's a lot of cool stuff, and you cover a lot in this book. But let's go through. I know you said that you were really kind of enamored with the aspects of Jesus and this story. Where do you want to take us with that?
Well, I want to get into that, but I think I want to finish about Enoch and Lamech. Okay. And I'm going to read some from the chapter Enoch's Magic Carpet Ride. I think it's kind of the best way to get this, because it's hard to remember all of this. So much heavy duty stuff going on. So we're going to talk about Enoch. Now, Enoch was the 6th descendant of the Adam from the genealogical side of the Sethites, the descendants of Seth, and son of Jared. Now, Jared lived for 962 years. Pretty long time. Okay. He sired Methuselah, who was Noah's grandfather. Now, Enoch was used to seeing people live long lives, just like he was used to meeting and hanging out with the Elohim. Now, here's a mention of Enoch in the Bible from the book of Genesis. Enoch lived 65 years and begat Methuselah. And Enoch walked with God after he begat Methuselah 300 years and begat sons and daughters. And all the days of Enoch were 365 years. Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. So Enoch went off with the Elohims like the ship that disappears into the horizon. However, nobody actually claimed that Enoch had died. Instead, he had just hitched a magical carpet ride with the gods. The legend of Enoch's ascension was widely known and accepted throughout the religious ancient world. But even before Enoch was flying high in the friendly skies, he had already had plenty of encounters with the Elohim and the angels. During that point in history, it was probably a daily occurrence to have some sort of interaction with ancient aliens that helped create humans. Enoch even suspected that one of the angels had sex with his grandson Lamech's wife and impregnated her. He described the sheer horror that was the miraculous birth of this child in the book of Noah. An ancient Hebrew text added to the book of Enoch, a work that was put together in stages during the first half of the 2nd century BC. The predicament Enoch's grandson found himself in was clear. Lamech had recently married a woman who gave birth to a child that bared no resemblance whatsoever to either him or his immediate family. The child's appearance was entirely unlike any other human being, and his eyes were mysteriously able to make the house glow like the sun. The entire chapter is eye-opening, to say the least. The book of Noah states, "And after some days my son Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech, and she became pregnant by him and bore a son. And his body was white as snow and red as the blooming of a rose. And the hair of his head and his long locks were white as wool, and his eyes beautiful. And when he opened his eyes, he lighted up the whole house like the sun, and the whole house was very bright. Thereupon he rose in the hands of his midwife, opened his mouth, and conversed with the Lord of righteousness. And his father Lamech was afraid of him and fled, and came to his father Methuselah. And he said unto him, I have begotten a strange son, diverse from and unlike men, and resembling the sons of God of heaven. And his nature is different, and he is not like us. And his eyes are as the rays of the sun, and his countenance is glorious. And it seems to me that he is not sprung from me, but from the angels. And I fear that in his days a wonder may be brought upon the earth. And now, my father, I am here to petition thee and implore thee that thou mayest go to Enoch, our father, and learn from him the truth, for his dwelling place is amongst the angels. And when Methuselah heard the words of his son, he came to me to the ends of the earth, for he had heard I was there. And he cried aloud and heard his voice, and I came to him, and I said, Behold, here I am, my son. Wherefore hast thou come to me? And he answered and said, Because of a great cause of anxiety have I come to thee, and because of a disturbing vision have I approached. And now, my father, hear me. Unto Lamech, my son, there hath been born a son, the like of whom there is none, and his nature is not like a man's. And the color of his body is whiter than snow, and redder than the bloom of a rose, and the hair of his head is whiter than white wool, and his eyes are like the rays of the sun. And he rose in the hands of the midwife, and opened his mouth, and blessed the Lord of heaven. His father Lamech became afraid and fled. And I did not believe he was the offspring from him, but he was in the likeness of the angels of heaven. And I, behold, have come to thee to make thou hast known the truth. And Enoch answered and said unto him, The Lord will do a new thing on the earth, and this I have already seen in a vision, and make known to thee that in the generation of my father Jared, some of the angels of heaven transgressed the word of the Lord. And behold, they committed sins and transgressed the law, and had united themselves with women, and committed the sin with them, and married some of them, and begot children by them. And they all produce on the earth giants, not according to the spirit, but according to the flesh. And there shall be a great punishment on the earth, and the earth shall be cleansed from all impurity. So, Enoch was telling them that he already knew the angels are making these, having sex with the Eves, and some of them were born giants. And Lamech was concerned that, his wife was banged by an angel, and now I got some crazy, half hybrid alien child.
I used to love that show, Banged by an Angel.
So, once the child was born, Lamech knew that his wife had been unfaithful, because the infant resembled a strange son, diverse from and unlike man, and resembling the sons of the gods of heaven. Now, those are curious quotes. If these are spiritual beings, right? How could they have sex if they were just ethereal beings, right? If they were just angels, And why would they say they resemble the sons of God of heaven if there wasn't actually some sort of alien interference or some sort of alien other presence on the earth during this time? So, the whole chapter is just it's extraordinary conclusion for Lamech to make, and a very strange subject for religious scribes to invent without reason. If his account is recorded actual event in history, implies that the strange appearance of his child matched the offspring of angels, which is a product of the union between a mortal woman and a divine messenger in the service of the Elohim. This would be an impossible act if we consider Christian traditions as seeing angels as incorporeal beings, spiritual, without physical form. So it's, again, once you remove the fantasy-like description and you go into the concrete mode, you have all these sort of encounters. It's too much, man.
There's so many people that bang their heads against this topic and want to dissect it and break it apart. There's the Bible seems to be coded in many ways. We know that the final chapter of Revelation is mostly written in code, and that a lot of what had been misinterpreted and misread in the past, like the number of 666 being the mark of the beast, which would be, I remember UPC codes were going to be the mark of the beast because you had to have a UPC code in order to do business, and that's how it said it in the Bible. And then it was going to be this, and then it was going to be that, but it's always open to interpretation. And then we find that the scholars really say 666 was a numerical number that was associated with Nero, and this is a way of passing notes kind of in school without the teacher being able to read or understand what it was, so you weren't considered a heretic. How do we know that a lot of these points that are being made are not, I guess, shrouded, clues that have nothing to do with, angelic intervention or alien interference, and are just ways to try to pass messages from one group of people to another about some impending issue?
I think there is a lot of that going on, of course. The book of Revelations is fantastic. And then, you look into the second book of Esdras, which these are all apocryphal writings. It's amazing that Revelations was kept in, the mark of the beast. That's, they're literally saying things that are happening now, right? You got to get biometric scanning, microchipped, the removal of cash, credit-based society. All of these things, coded or not coded, it's very strange that they'll be able to peer that far into the future. And also, you have basically a lot of ancient stories and stuff like this that were just misinterpreted because they didn't understand the technology, and has ways to actually communicate in secret as well. There's certain code words, right? Like you're saying, and it would make sense. Especially if they're trying to, if these ideas are dangerous or could be, you could get killed for them, right? In certain points of history, you have this. So I think there's a lot of that going on. I think it's a good mix of everything. And the fact that it's so old, too, and whatever's lost in translation, we have to keep that in mind. You have to kind of open your mind into analyze all of these things and read, God loves knowledge. So you're going to want to read as many of ancient scriptures from all different cultures as you can. And I think that's the best way to go about it. But at the end of the day, it's still, we're still bound by karma, and we're bound by the laws of the universe, no matter what name you give it. So I think, the key to understanding all of this is, one, not to be afraid, right? If there were ancient aliens, and there are still ancient aliens and modern aliens and everything else, I think that's a cool thing. I think that's all of us, we all share a history. Every person, doesn't matter race, religion, culture, whatever. We all share a history of Earth that belongs to every single one of us, and we all need to know this. And I think if everyone was aware of this, there would be a lot less room for fighting. And just think about how many people have died and continue to die in the name of religion. What is that? That's ridiculous.
Right. There's a lot of aspects of all of this that just doesn't line up or make much sense. I want to know too, when you were looking through this and being pointed to some of these aspects that are claimed to be proof of alien intervention or connection with us, were there any that you looked at that you threw out that you said, no, I'm just not seeing it here?
Not really. In terms of the biblical aspect, I think a lot of them, they're just misinterpreted because the technology, the vocabulary wasn't there. So I think that's what kind of gets lost. But, even now, you look at something like the Travis Walton case, I believe that guy. Like, why would you, there's no need to make up. Now, of course you have people, hucksters, and there's going to be fairy tales, and, people want to be famous and stuff like that who will make things up, of course. But I think genuine, most of what we hear and what we see, you could just get a $4,000 pair of night vision goggles and go up to, parts in Arizona, and you'll see a bunch of weird spacecraft flying around. Now, that doesn't mean they're not UFO. They could just be government spacecraft. And that's a whole other issue and a whole other problem of why this stuff doesn't come to light, because, if the government has been secretly developing alien technology for 100 years or 50 years or whatever it is, and 80% of all UFO sightings are just Lockheed Martin experimental spacecraft, you're going to have an issue with the technology, meaning they're going to have to release this technology. And if this technology is released, it basically makes the known world and the oil-based world obsolete, right? So you have all these elements combined. And then you also have the fact that what would happen to the religious structure, if these technologies were released and if the truth came out about aliens, ancient and modern. So it seems to be that, yeah, and then you want to wonder about time travel, because if you look at all the people that have been murdered and all the weird things that have happened, have they figured this out where did they had to time travel and kill everyone, and are we living in alternate timelines? You got to give Trump some props for releasing the JFK files, which have a tremendous amount of information. Now, I'm sure some scholars it might not be nothing new, but to most people, there's just incredible treasure trove of information there that basically proves that the government is is totally corrupt and will kill you and everyone else.
There's nothing been released out of the current documents that say that specifically. There's a lot of hint and inference, but there's nothing. As a matter of fact, they've left out. You'll see a one-page start, and then there's no part 2 to it. So they're still redacting and holding back a lot of the deals. But I don't think there's been anything that we can clearly look at to state that this. Not that I'm saying I don't believe there was a conspiracy. I do, but I don't think there's been anything concrete released yet out of that information that we can hang a hat on or point at as a smoking gun.
There is one. The evidence of the bullet hole in the front window basically destroys the narrative that there was one shooter.
Right.
And they've been trying to destroy that for a long time. So there are a few things. But yeah, obviously, anything major, it's gonna be blacked out, of course. The fact that Trump's even trying to do it, and they even said there's about 400 files they won't even let him release. So they definitely. When your last words are "I'm just a patsy," come on.
No, but a lot of people don't want to. They deflect attention, and again, I'm on the side of believing that Oswald was not the shooter, but a lot of people will try to deflect saying they didn't do it, and there's, insurmountable evidence that proves they do. But going back into the ancient aliens in the Bible and the stories that go through here, I know our time's going to slip by us pretty quickly, so I want to make sure that we can mention we're going to continue on with Xavier for the bit of time that we have left here. But I want you to kind of go into some of the aspects of this that you find the most mind-blowing, the ones that really kind of opened you up to the prospects of and possibilities of this. And do you believe that we will ever truly have any kind of disclosure?
Well, I think we're kind of going through a slow disclosure now, and but as full disclosure, I don't think so. I don't. Like I said, it's going to be really hard for them to reveal this technology and to reveal, especially, that we know that one of their end game plans and one of their goals to bring about a new world order would be the fake alien invasion. So they kind of need to keep the cat hidden away if they're gonna be able to stage this. If a bunch of UFOs flying around destroying cities, and they're portrayed as aliens, but they're just flown by the Air Force, right? These things I'm assuming will happen eventually. So there are, I know Tom DeLonge's trying to do some work, and they're trying to push for disclosure, and they're trying to, to let this out, but it's just too beyond our control. And there's the real world, right? And then there's like the world that's given to us. Like the presidents or whatever, they don't know anything. They're like DARPA is the real government, right? And they're gonna dictate what actually comes out in terms of information and revealing. There's so much other stuff to worry about. Why are they gonna? Think about what's on Mars and what they have to continually cover up. We could find trees, you could see blue skies. Looks like dinosaur bones and all kinds of ancient, fossils and seashells and stuff going on up there. And if we come from Mars, it would make a whole lot of sense that we wouldn't want Earth turning into the next Mars, or what happened in Mars was whatever caused the flood. Was that part of some impact on Mars? Why is there, ancient sort of Martian fragments that are basically around the same time of the flood? So there's just so much going on that you have to keep an open mind, and we have to be able to look at these things with then we have the whole issue of transhumanism and robots. That's something they never talk about. And for good reason. It's terrifying to think that we could literally be replaced by robots. And we go into a Battlestar Galactica sort of Cylon timeline, right? And these are very, very, Skynet, that's a real thing. These are very, very legitimate concerns.
Talk to me about Moses' trek through the desert with his people. What are the best indicators in that story that you feel really kind of outline communication or alien presence? Moses would be the whole story of Moses is pretty cool, because when he gets to, the first thing is always has to, when he meets the gods, he always has to go to the mountain, right? And it's always some sort of earthquake and shaking and thunder and these sort of things, which would be attributed to some sort of massive spaceship, right? And why is, here's one interesting thing. When Moses goes up, he has to, and he goes up for 40 days? So he's hanging around with them for 40 days. And then he comes back and his face is all messed up, so he has to wear a veil. What happened to his face? Right? And why, when he was meeting, when the Lord would come to him, he had to set up his own little tabernacle. They had to have a little, a pillar of smoke would basically lead them, right, in the skies. And then at night it would become a pillar of fire, and this is what led Moses. And if he wished to chat with the Elohim, he would have to go to the meeting tent, and he would speak with this pillar of cloud that descended and stood at the opening of the tent before Moses. The pillar of cloud always took the same specific position each time Moses wished to consult it. In the book of Exodus explains this, and this is not a vision or imagination. These are real descriptions. And it's kind of strange why that this tent, these conferences would take place outside the tent, and only Moses, right, could be around, and everyone else would be far off. He was always separated. And this would be some sort of
Was it a drone? Was it what was this that would appear to him? He'd have his little conference. They would go back up and then continue leading him by steamy clouds. I mean, this kind of is basically described at night as visible glowing fires. Why all this strange technology and strange mechanics to lead them to the promised land? It's very strange, and he wanted to know, what is this? And this is kind of what, we get into the glory of God, right? This is very, very interesting. The Hebrew is like salim, so it's kind of like, it means, there's a physical aspect to this, right? And why would he had to take precautionary measures, like with the Ark and the Covenant and stuff. Like he had to, you got to wear the certain like hazmat suit with the chemicals and not the chemicals, but the certain rocks and certain metals, right? That would protect you. Why would the glory of God kill a man? Why would spiritual transcendence be fatal? Shouldn't God be able to control his powers, especially if they're lethal? So you have these sort of interests with this, with Moses having to be in a situation where he's exposed to some sort of dangerous devices from the gods. Because the Elohim, which would be the gods who were leading him, they could only provide the guidance to control the effects of the glory. Like, right? They couldn't undo or mitigate it. So it's very, very strange that the theological concept is not definable, because it's not it's a physical thing. It's not like sort of a vision which they want you to think about it. So, before Moses was able to witness the glory, the Elohim made clear steps that he needed to take, which are exclusively aimed at physically safeguarding him. So why would he have to be physically safeguarded in order to see the glories of God? And these are kind of what in the book of Exodus they talk about, these glories of God, and they want to make it like a glorious thing and a metaphysical thing, but it's actually, they're describing physical encounters. So they gave him the guidelines, the precautions, and they told him, don't look directly at it, don't stand before it, right? when the glory of God comes, don't look at it, don't stand before it, stand away. You might die if you do. They direct him where to stand, so he wouldn't be affected by the Lord's glory. And they even tell him that he might see the back of his face as it flies over. So this is a part in the Bible, in Exodus, where he goes up to the mountain. He's told specifically to stand in a crevice, right, in the rock, so he's safe. That way he can see the glory of God, and then the glory of God passes over him. So they're literally describing a spaceship flying very near him, which could be dangerous. So he has to be protected. So they give him all these safety precautions. So this indicates that Moses was witnessing a close-up flyby of one of the spaceships. And Exodus 33:20-33 says, "Furthermore, thou cannot see my face, for there shall no man see me and live. Also the Lord said, Behold, there is a place by me, and thou shalt stand upon the rock. And while my glory passes by, I will put thee in a cleft of the rock, and will cover thee with my hand while I pass by. After I will take away my hand, and thou shalt see back my parts, but you can never see my face." So he's basically saying you're going to see the back of the spaceship fly over. And then this goes into it's just incredible in how, in the book explains. I didn't do a good job explaining the glory of God, whatever, because it's tough. But in the book, it kind of explains from the Hebrew and how Big Lino translated it, what it's talking about. And, so we have to wonder, what is God's glory that it can only be seen from the back, but not directly, right?
Right.
That's strange.
Right.
Yeah, that doesn't even make sense. And what was passing by Moses that was so dangerous has to require special protection. How could the Elohim protect them with only a hand? That don't even make sense. Indeed, it's difficult to find answers if one keeps thinking that the glory of God was something transcendent. The Elohim known to Moses as Yahweh agreed to show the kavod The kavod is one of the elements of this vehicle in action. So they had to do this without killing Moses. You know, they had to make sure he was safe and everything else. So then this is when he gets the Ten Commandments, and he comes down and his face is all messed up. You know, was it burned by the glowing light that required a veil to cover it? I mean, what is this? And we know, and this is all in the Bible. Exodus explains, you know, when Moses came down from Mount Sinai with the two tables of testimony, he came down from the mount, and that Moses knew that the skin of his face shone by reason of his speaking with him. So when the children of Israel saw Moses, they said his skin had shone, and they were afraid to come near him. You know, and so basically they're like, what happened? Dude, what happened to your face? You know, you went to see God and now your face is all messed up, right? So it's very, very strange. So what happened to it? Was it exposed to radiation, right? That produced burns? So there's a lot of things with the Moses story, and it's
a lot of this is documented in the book, Ancient Aliens in the Bible, Evidence of UFOs, Nephilim, and the True Face of Angels in Ancient Scriptures. Xavier Hayes, our guest. And is there a way people can keep up with you and your books and what else you're going to be a part of? Is there a website that's good to point them to?
Oh, man, basically Facebook is about the only thing I can get a hold of. I just got rid of everything. I kind of, Amazon, the books are on Amazon.
Right. And we've got a link up to that at Darkness Radio under the Killer Deals link. Xavier, it's good catching up with you again. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
It's a pleasure. Thank you. Well, that's it for another week here on the Best in Paranormal Talk Radio. We'll be back Monday with Parashare and Supernatural news on Beyond the Darkness.